We've got an awesome keynote this morning. Someone who's not a rookie to the reliability world for sure, but somebody who's actually done the keynote here before and a couple of years ago. And, in the world of acronyms in which we live, I mean, yesterday, for a few people who were here during the presentation that Chris Colson and Shannon Livingston did, they were using acronyms left and right. And, we talk about things like CMRP, SMRP. There's acronyms everywhere. I started looking at who we would get for our keynote this year, and I came up with an acronym for Senator Paul Campbell. The 3 E's. When you have a keynote, you want to be able to cover the 3 E's. You want to be able to energize, educate, and entertain. And I'm confident that Paul's going to be able to do that. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, man. I want to entertain you a little bit this morning, but I also want to tell you that my background is reliability. I'm a chemical engineer undergraduate with an MBA. And I've worked at a couple of facilities. One of them I've helped design, and it's been reliable since 1980, and it's getting better, and it's still running 33 years later. The other one was a facility that I was given a challenge with to try to save. In fact, it's when I was given corporate responsibility when I became a regional president with Alcoa. He told me the 2 things I was going to have to do with this plant in Indiana. You're going to have to harvest the asset. That's a fancy way of saying run to fail. And shut it down. And they also said your plant manager there is a problem because the recordable injury rate's running about 8. And so you need to find somebody to take his position. I can tell you what we did with reliability. That plant's still running today. And that plant manager's still there today. And the guy that told me I needed to fire him, he's gone. Before I get into my rules, I do want to tell you a little story about this was the last time I was here. I was flying back with a guy that'd been to the conference, UE system, and he'd learned new technology, and he was going to go back and wow his customer with it. And he got on an airplane, and he was sitting there writing some stuff down and taking some notes, and this trial lawyer got on beside him. And the trial lawyer said, he says, you're a manufacturer. He said, yeah, the trial lawyer's thinking to himself, I'm going to take some of this guy's money. He says, you want to play a game? And he says, what do you mean? He said, I'll ask you a question, and if you don't know the answer, you give me $5. And he said, and he's thinking to himself, I'm a trial lawyer, I got all the answers. You can ask me a question, and if I don't know the answer, I'll give you $500. And so the guy thought, the old manufacturer says, well, money's been tight anyway. I'll play the game with you. So the trial lawyer says, I'll go first. He said, how many miles from the earth to the moon? And the manufacturer thought a minute, and he said, man, I knew that probably back in high school, but I don't have a clue. Here's your $5 bill. So he pulled his $5 bill and gave it to him. He looked over at the trial lawyer and he says, now it's my turn. He said, what goes up the hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? They were still sitting at the gate, so the trial lawyer was a little stumped. He does his Google search. He can't find the answer. He calls back to his home office, and he says, I got to get some help here. They can't find an answer either. So he pulls out 5 $100 bills and hands this old manufacturer. The manufacturer's over still taking notes, and the trial lawyer can't stand it. He said, okay. He says, what goes up the hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? Manufacturer reached in his wallet, pulled out $5 and handed it to him, and says, I don't know either. I'm going to start off, and these are some rules. These are some things I've learned in manufacturing and life in general. And I want to go through these rules because they make a point, and this point applies to whatever you're doing, but it really applies to trying to institute or implement reliability. The first one is my rule. I got 3 rules on education. The first one says education and intelligence are mutually exclusive. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Some of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my life didn't even finish high school. I know one gentleman, actually I know 2 of them, one gentleman that now owns 5 businesses in a plantation, and he dropped out of school in the 7th grade to help his family work through business. And some of the dumbest people I've worked with had PhD after their name. And I don't want to insult anybody here, but I'm telling you, education and intelligence are mutually exclusive. I tell when I was president of 2 professional societies, and I'd go to some of the student chapters, and I'd tell the young engineers, I'd say, you may have a BS, an MS, or a PhD in engineering, but that operator on the floor or that mechanic on the floor has a PhD in that process. Go talk to them, learn from them. They'll make you successful, or they'll make you look like you don't know what you're doing. So education, intelligence, are mutually exclusive. The next one is that most of us are educated beyond our own level of intelligence. What I mean by that is the good Lord gives you 2 eyes. He gives you 2 ears. He gives you 1 mouth. If you'll observe and listen and keep your mouth shut, you'll continue to learn your whole life. I'm still learning. I'm now a state senator after working for many, many years in manufacturing, and I'm still learning. And I learn from a lot of people, from small people all the way to the tall people. I learn every day. I try to learn something every day from somebody. I've consulted in a lot of plants, and even the worst plants I've been into were doing something better than I was doing. I could learn from them. So you always need to learn your whole life. This is my 3rd rule. Life is the best teacher if you can afford the tuition. And what I mean by tuition, that's the mistakes we make every single day. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying something new. And if you're not trying something new, you're accepting the status quo. You're going to make mistakes throughout your life, but you got to adjust from those mistakes. But fortunately, most of it, a lot of the companies that we work for have paid for our tuition. But life is the best teacher, but you are going to make mistakes, and that's called tuition. I got 3 rules on bridges. Don't burn the ones in front of you. It's not as common as it should be, or common sense is not as common as it should be. And I tell the young people, when I go to speak to young people, the youth groups, I say, be careful what you're doing on social media. Because when you go for a job, the first thing you're going to do is look at social media. They're going to look at Facebook. They're going to look at LinkedIn. They're going to look at YouTube. And what you do in jest and some humor sometimes will come back and hurt you going forward. So, don't burn the ones in front of you, because we all tend to be our own worst enemies from time to time. The second rule is don't burn the ones behind you. After I retired from Alcoa, I hung around, and Alcoa wanted me to consult with them, which I did for several years before I was elected. So you don't burn the ones behind you, because you never know who you're going to need. You never know who you're going to fall back on. And besides, they may want to bring you back as a consultant, so you always want to be friends with those you leave. So always leave with a good reputation when you go forward. The 3rd rule of bridges, and this is very important, when things are going badly, when you're not getting your results, and this could be anything from what you're doing with your wife at home or your husband at home, it could be anything from what's going on at work. It's called life. The 3rd rule of bridges is get over it. Things don't always go the way we want them to go. We got to make adjustments in everything that we do from time to time, whether it's at work or in our personal lives. So the 3rd rule of bridges is called life. And working for companies sometimes, making money is a problem. It's a trouble. You got to put extra hours and extra time in. You got to solve problems. So the 3rd rule of bridges is when things aren't going your way, get over it. That's what you're supposed to be doing. There are 2 types of people in the world. Those that tell you why something won't work, and those that are showing that person that tell you why it won't work, how you can make it work, or how she can make it work. You want to be that second type. Don't ever look at a problem and say we can't do it. And because something didn't work 5 years ago, it may work today because technology changed. So always take advantage of new technology. Always look at how you can solve a problem. Look at what you can do going forward. I got another one on my 2nd rule on people. There are 3 types of people in the world. I want to make a point on this one. Those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that wonder what happened. Okay? We got too many people in this life and that work for us that wonder what happened. I can tell you, you don't tolerate mediocrity in what you're doing. If you got a business and you got somebody that's a mediocre performer, you need to get rid of them. If you don't get rid of the mediocre performers in life, in your workplace, you're punishing the people that are doing their job every single day. You got to take out your mediocre performers. You got to continue to raise that level of excellence. If you're not in what you're doing for excellence, you're in the wrong field. So when you got somebody that's not performing, get rid of them. I've terminated a lot of people in my life because I just don't believe in tolerating mediocrity. Life is too short, and it's too hard, and it's too demanding to tolerate mediocrity. Rule of holes. Y'all have heard this one. When you're in one, quit digging. Most of us are still digging. And I can tell you how you can tell if you're still digging in a hole. If you say, yes, but, you're still digging. If you say, let me explain, you're still digging. And you can really get in trouble with these with your spouse. So you got to be real careful with that one. But when you're in a hole, recognize it. If you make a mistake, be honest about it. Because we're all going to make mistakes. The quicker you admit your mistake, the quicker you tell somebody you're sorry, the quicker you can get out of that hole and move on. So the rule of holes, when you're in one, quit digging. My daddy's got several rules up here that I've learned from my daddy. He's passed away now, but But one of the things he always said is it doesn't cost any more to go first class. You just can't stay as long, okay? And what he was really trying to say, what he was really trying to tell me was, if you're going to do something, do it right. If you're not going to do it with the best of your ability, let somebody else do it. I don't care if you may be the best expert around in a company, an organization that can get something done, but if you can't apply yourself to it, somebody else can do it better than you do it. If you ever have to say, good enough, you think about this, good enough never is. That means you could have done it better. It means you could have done it better. The boss rule. This is a good one. If you got to tell somebody you're the boss, you're really not the boss. And always remember this. Boss spelled backwards is double S-O-B. In this day and age, we don't have time for bosses because we're all a team. I don't care if you're the plant manager. The guy that you hired yesterday is just as important to that organization as you are. He's got to do his job, or she's got to do her job just like you do your job. You got to do it every single day. You got to be a team. You got to be all pulling in the same direction, and you don't want to be a double SOB. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on at the Mount Holly plant. That plant started in 1980, and that plant is still running today. In 1980, I think one of the slides will show this, we had 33 aluminum facilities in the United States. The U.S. was the largest aluminum producer in the world. Today, the U.S. is either fourth or fifth, and there's less than 10 plants operating today producing aluminum in the United States. This plant's one of them. It's surviving. The plant in Indiana is one of them. It's surviving. A lot of it goes back to reliability. That plant had a design capacity of 180,000 metric tons a year. That was about $2,000 a metric ton. It cost $360 million to build it. If you look at that last line, the replacement cost is about $1.5 billion to replace that plant. It's still operating today with some of the older technology, but technology is still good. We increased the capacity to 240,000 metric tons, or about 60,000 metric tons, without adding capital. We spent about $10 million, and what the $10 million was spent on was to upgrade the environmental system so we could keep our operating permit through EPA and through the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. We had to spend the $10 million to upgrade the environmental systems, but effectively it was a non-capital, and it was driven by reliability. We were able to take the hardware we had at that facility and run it harder, but still take care of it and make it more reliable, so that instead of operating that plant at 180,000 amps of electricity, 180,000 amps, we were able to run that plant at 240,000 amps. And if you go back to Faraday's law, you can calculate exactly how much aluminum it produces in Faraday's law. So basically, we added 60,000 tons at less than $200 a ton because of reliability. That's how powerful that is. If we hadn't done that, that plant would not be running today. The unit cost comes down. If you can put more units through the existing hardware, you bring your unit cost down, which drives your better to competition. It drives your competition crazy because you can sell at a lower price. You can actually take market share. Productivity is very important. And reliability. You can't do the good productivity unless you have a reliable operation in your facility. That plant in South Carolina is a non-union facility, but I can tell you about the one in Indiana that I'll get to in just a few minutes. Is a very strong union plant. In fact, it was a very militant union. So this stuff works equally well in a non-union plant as a union plant, and that I was given responsibility to implement it in the Indiana plant simply because of what we were accomplishing in South Carolina. But again, I was told to harvest the asset there. But that plant runs for about 3.5 work hours per ton to produce a ton of aluminum. 3.5 work hours per ton. The industry average is over 6. That's 2.5 work hours per ton you're saving. And you're paying something over $100,000 a year fully loaded for an employee. It's a capital intensive operation. So you figure that you're saving 2.5 times $50. You're saving $125 a ton. That makes you more competitive. That keeps you operating when other people are shutting down around you. So you got to drive reliability in everything that you do. 30% of the people that plant started in 1980 are still there today. Most of those that have left that plant left because they retired, because it's now 30 years old. So 90% of the people that leave that facility are due to retirement. Only 10% are usually terminated every year, and they're usually terminated for a lot of reasons. But basically, it can be from attendance to conduct, drugs, or anything else. But only 2% of the people you see every year are usually terminated. And employees take care of themselves. It's a very, very good operation as far as employees go. It's a team effort from the top to bottom. There's a big safety advantage. I told you about the Indiana plant that was running about 8, recordable rate of about 8. Indiana plant's now down to less than 2. Still not where it ought to be. The Mount Holly plant runs less than 1. And when you handle 500 million pounds of molten aluminum, and you do it with the molten electrolyte and do with those other things, you got to watch safety in everything that you do. When you're running 240,000 amps at 800 volts, you better know what you're doing, because you can fry somebody in a heartbeat. And there's never been any problem with electricity at that plant. But the money you invest in training will stay at that plant because your employees stay with you. You can afford to do the things that we do, which we have a learning center, which we continue to upgrade skills of employees. We spend well over 60 hours a year training employees, especially mechanics and electricians, because of all the technology changes. It probably runs closer to 100 hours a year. But because the plant operates well, is safe, and the housekeeping is good, there's a lot of pride in that facility. And if you go around Charleston right now, we just brought Boeing in, you'll see a lot of Boeing t-shirts. There's a lot of pride in that facility. And that's really what you want from your employees. You can pay for the back, but they got to be willing to give you their mind. And you got to create an environment where they give you their mind to go with the back. You can buy the back, but you don't buy the mind. The employee will give you that if they want to. Because of reliability, we can be very flexible on policies. You know, we do vacation by the hour. It means if an hourly employee needs to take has a dental appointment, a doctor's appointment, they got a child playing on a sports team, and they want to leave Friday to go to the game, as long as they work out the deal with their supervisor that most of the work is done, it doesn't involve overtime, that employee can take a 2-hour vacation and leave early. What it does for the company, it burns vacation time, because you're not really replacing that person when they leave. So he's burning his vacation. He's getting what he wants, and the company's getting what they want because they're burning vacation time. We allow schedules to be changed by vote, as long as it involves the whole area. In other words, if it's a round-the-clock operation, all 4 shifts would have to vote. But they can work 4 12s, they can work 12-hour shifts, they can work 8-hour shifts. If you're working Monday through Friday, you can work 4 10s, you can work 4 9s and a 4. You can work 5 8s, and you can change it seasonally. A lot of the people, especially working in the lab, they'll work 4 9s and a 4 in the summertime. In the wintertime, they'll go back to 5 8s. And we allow variable times to start. We don't care as management because of the reliability of that plant, as long as it doesn't impact safety, number 1, productivity, number 2, and efficiency, number 3. As long as those 3 things are held, why as management do we care what the schedule is? We don't. And we let the people decide. There's no difference in benefits except on retirement. Now, there's a difference in compensation depending on what you're doing. If you're the plant manager, you make a little more than the labor that you hired yesterday, but by the same token, there's no difference in benefits except for retirement. And we allow peer review. And if you're not doing peer review, I would suggest that you study what peer review is. What peer review is, we brought Harvey Karras in, who was a consultant, I think, out of Maryland, come in and taught us how to do peer review. Peer review means if there's a problem, including termination, discipline, work assignments, an employee can ask for a peer panel. A peer panel is he draws 6 names or she draws 6 names out of a hat that are trained peer panelists and can pick 3. And then draws 4 managers out of a hat and can pick 2. And it's a straight up and down vote. So if you termination and that employee can make a case that he was wrongfully terminated to that peer panel, he goes back to work. I will tell you this. You can also appeal to management. And most employees, if they're guilty, will appeal to management because their peers are harder on them than management is. And that's just how it works. But peer review is something that we thought, it stopped a lot of the complaining and constant bitching about work performance or I'm not getting my assignments or the supervisor was wrong with me or something, because of the employees can say, why don't you ask for a peer panel? I'm tired of you complaining about it. Do something about it. Reliability shows up in the maintenance side. You know, maintenance has got to deliver reliability and operations have got to pull reliability, because otherwise it won't work. It's got to be both of them making it happen. It's also got to be the whole team, engineering, environmental, and everything else. That plant runs about 90% planned work. You know, it'll go from 88 to 91 or 92. It's hard to get much above 90 because it's expensive. About 2% are breakdowns at that facility. 2% means it's going to break down, I got to fix it today. A trouble call means I can't make the next planning cycle. There's about 8% of that. I got a pump that's vibrating. I got a fan that's making a noise. I got a bearing that's squeaking, but I can get by until Thursday. And so I'm going to keep running the process, and I'll watch this, but I'm going to get by, and I'm going to get the parts in. I'll take it down Thursday when I can schedule within a schedule. So that's a trouble call for us. And if you look at the total inventory in the facility, it runs about 0.4% of the asset replacement value. And even 0.4% is about $4 million. So you got a lot of capital tied up on the ground that you ought to be using to make money with somewhere else. So you want to minimize that, but you still got to protect the reliability of the operation. You know, when somebody talks about lean manufacturing, and I'll get into that in just a few minutes because this plant is doing as much lean as it can possibly do. A lot of times your inventory is driven because you got unreliable systems. You got unreliable, so you have to have work in process inventories. You have to have safety stock between processes, and the aluminum plant's 3 different processes. So you got to work to get that down. Overtime runs about 5%. I don't want overtime to be 0. That means I got too many people, and I don't want it to be above 10%. That means I got too few people. So my personal goal was to run somewhere between 5% plus or minus. I'd even let it get up closer to 10%, because if it's 0, you got too many people, and if it's 20%, you got way too few people. You're doing something wrong. So you got to have some kind of a rule of thumb that you go by on what you're trying to do on overtime, but you don't want it to be 0. And overtime is not bad. Even backlog of work is not bad. You can't do planned work unless you got a 5 or 6 week backlog to start bringing the supplies and parts in and start creating stuff, kitting stuff. That plant's over 2 million square feet, but on back shifts and weekend, there's only 4 mechanics in that whole plant, 2 electricians. I think now they've actually brought somebody from the mobile shop because of all the mobile equipment that exists in that plant: forklifts, front-end loaders, metal haulers, those type of things. So there's probably 5 mechanics counting that one, and 2 electricians on back shifts and weekends. And they will work between the areas. You got an electrode side, you got a reduction side, you got a casting side. And so they'll go from area to area as they need to be. Plus, because it's non-union, they can actually have some of the production operators assist them with some of the work that's going on. Talk about plant performance and reliability. Basically, it's customer retention. This plant runs like it's supposed to. It produces a quality product, a consistent product, so the customer knows exactly how that ingot's going to perform. Whether it's an extrusion ingot, whether it's a foundry product, whether it's a remelt ingot, or whether it's a rolling ingot, or whatever else is going to be with it, it's consistent. There's about 10,000 shipments a year. You figure 500 million pounds, at roughly 50,000 pounds of shipment on a truck, because most of it goes by truck. We get less than 20 complaints a year on that. And that could be anything from quality in the product to a manifest problem, to the used the wrong skids on it, you did the wrong color coding, you put poly on it when it didn't call for poly, or it called for poly and you didn't put it on it, but about 20 times a year out of 10,000 times. Still not good enough because you're still getting some complaints, but it's not bad. And 98% of the deliveries are on time, and on time meaning at the customer's dock, not leaving the plant, at the customer's dock. Because you got so many of the people, the customers now that run JIT or just in time on their inventories, and it's important for us to prove to them that we can meet that JIT. We can load it on their dock when they need it. And we're actually greater than JIT because we'll change the alloys. Some of the extrusion plants use different alloys. So they may have an alloy on order, they call us and they want to change that alloy, and we can do that pretty quickly. One of the things that's missed in so much of businesses today is we can max out on value-added product. We can take orders that other people either can't take or won't take. We can take the difficult products. The more difficult the products, the more of a premium price you get out of it. But some people won't take orders because they're not capable of taking orders. The plant's not capable of making that product. And so that never shows up on a profit and loss statement because that's a customer order that was lost that you never had on your books. So you never know how much that cost you. But it's a cost there. And what's all this stuff worth to you? You know, it's job security for the people at that facility. Again, there are less than 10 plants running today in the U.S. that make aluminum. A safety performance, I told you they're recordables, less than 1. It's recognition from the outside. You know, this plant was the first aluminum facility to achieve ISO 9002 in the world. It was the 5th plant in the U.S. and the 15th plant in the world of any industry to achieve the ISO 14000 those standards. So you got quality and you got environmental covered. And as you get into those standards, you got to educate your people because otherwise those will not work and you can't maintain them. people have got to understand the aspects of everything that they do and what part that plays in manufacturing. And again, what you're forced to do, if you don't do it any other time, to empower your folks, to give them what they need to do and then get out of their way. Get out of their way and let them do it. And don't micromanage them. It's a competitive advantage in the commodity industry, and it keeps you going. It's even with high energy costs, and I'm a little bit worried about the South Carolina plant because in producing aluminum, it's very energy intensive and not so much labor intensive. But that plant pays about $200 million a year for electricity, $200 million a year. And so we got to wonder what's going on with energy in this country and what's going on with energy in the world as to how long we can still continue to compete. Because that's about 35% of the cost of producing aluminum is the price of energy. So I'm a little bit worried about that. But even with high energy, you can save it on labor, you can save it on doing value-added products, you can do those type of things. But it's really survival with against some people that have structured advantages. You got some people that will give you energy or reduced energy by governments throughout the world. So you've got to be very, very disciplined to make things work and work well. How did all this happen? It's been going on since 1980, and every year it gets a little better, and we've had a lot of changes in management, and it continues to flourish because it doesn't matter who's there, the culture is there, the systems are in place, and it continues to go on, and that's important. So it's embedded, it's stronger than the people there. The mission that we had when we first started was, three things. It's quality to customers, opportunities for employees, and returns to our owners. If it didn't meet all three of those things, we didn't need to be doing it. If it was a capital project and it didn't do all three of those things, we didn't do it. If it met two of them, we didn't do it. It had to meet all three. Had to meet all three. Otherwise, it didn't make business sense. And the vision was kind of hokey, but I guarantee that everybody in the plant will know those things. The vision says we're not as good as we can be, as we should be, or we will be, because you got to have a culture of continuous improvement. You got to get better every single day. Some of you in the room know who Satchel Paige was. He was one of the early black pitchers in Major League Baseball. And if he had gotten started earlier, he could have been the Jackie Robinson. But he was a terrific pitcher. And one of his sayings was, "Don't look back, they may be gaining on you." And that's what your competition's doing. If you're not doing this stuff, your competition's going to run all over you. You may be better today, but you won't be better tomorrow unless you're doing some of these things. You got to do it with strategic planning, looking 5 and 10 years out. How you spend your money, what your customers are looking for. You got to be in front of your customer. Your customer's got to be a partner. What do they need in their product? What can make them better at what they do? I want to keep that customer. Reliability, excellence will sustain your operation, and if you can sustain it, you can improve it. You can reach a certain level, and you can go up from there. It also happens by leadership, and I'm going to get into that at the very end of the presentation when I talk about it. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not easy. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes total involvement from the plant. Again, it's got to be pushed by pulled by operations and pushed by maintenance. But you got to have good leadership, and you got to build everything on a foundation. You can't do lean manufacturing without reliability. Nothing works without starting with a foundation of reliability. But you got to do it every day, and that's what takes the discipline. You got to do it no matter what's going on with economies in the world. The first thing a lot of people will do, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, is they want to cut jobs, cut heads, corporate people. A lot of times it's at the operation, not at the corporate center. But you can't take shortcuts, and you got to do this every day. It takes a lot of discipline to do this stuff, to stay with it. When Alcoa acquired Alumax, which was in the late 90s, I guess in 98, 99, one of the things they looked at was the application of reliability on the smelters that Alumax had. They even did a tour of the plant. We're surprised we would allow them to come in and do a tour of the facility. What we told them was, what we do is common sense basically for reliability. But by the same token, you guys are not going to do it because you don't have the discipline to do it. And the guy leading the tour says, he's right, because we know what they're doing. They're using our technology, and they're kicking our butts with it. It was kind of funny because one of the things that motivated us when we were Alumax was the fact that we were concerned about the economies to scale, Alcoa being so large and we were the 5th largest aluminum producer in the world. Reynolds was the 4th largest producer in the world. Alcoa ended up buying Reynolds and Alumax. And if they hadn't, I think Reynolds and Alumax would have probably merged and been about as big as Alcoa. But they bought us, we saw their cost numbers, and we says, God, we were kicking their butts and didn't even know it. And we were about a third their size or about half their size. Alumax recognized, and we finally got over to Alcoa, that your largest controllable cost is reliability. Your largest controllable cost. You know, power is the largest cost in an aluminum plant, or aluminum oxide, bauxite refined aluminum oxide. But you got little you can do with those types. You can do current efficiencies, and you can try to manage your power. You can do contracts with the suppliers on some other things. But what I can control more than anything else is my reliability. And that comes right to the bottom line. I won't talk about the Indiana plant as I get to it. But when we recognized the largest controllable cost, we did an estimate, and at that time I was a regional president within Alcoa. And so we looked at what we thought we could save if we took in the same type of concept of culture, reliability into the Alcoa system. We felt like we could save more than $300 million. That's going straight to the bottom line. $300 million is a lot of money. And you get a lot of corporate attention when you do that. Again, back in 1980, we knew where we were. There were 33 smelters, and today there are less than 10. So you got to continue to push hard to do these type of things. And we knew we were competing globally with the Chinese. We were competing globally with the Russians. We were competing globally now in the Middle East, because you got so much energy, or there's free energy or cheap energy from what they flash off and they burn. They can turn that into electricity and turn that into aluminum. So we knew we had to be good at what we did. We also knew that we had to have lean manufacturing concepts. We had to continue to push that. And we knew that you couldn't sustain lean unless you had a reliable operation. We also knew that we did need to do a lot of non-capital solutions. When you're in an industry that's going down in the U.S., going up in the rest of the world because you're using more aluminum today than you ever have, you don't want to. It's hard to justify a lot of capital, especially some of the older operations. So you wanted to look at a non-capital approach to reliability. You know, we looked at how can we cut our cost and be better at what we do, and you can't cost cut your way to prosperity. Y'all have heard that before, and you're going to hear it again today. You can't cost cut your way to prosperity. You know, the things that you can do is delaying necessary capital projects. I'm going to wait and do this year after next, or year after next, and maybe year after next never comes. I can start delaying necessary maintenance spends. I'm not going to do roofing and siding. I'm not going to do painting. I'm going to take this forklift and see if I can't get another year or two out of it. And the first thing that most corporate people want to do is, again, reduce people, head count, body count. I can do that right away. I can do that right away. But when you start cutting your necessary cost, you start spending out of control. And I can tell you, last week Alcoa announced that they were going to look at what smelters they needed to operate and needed to take some capacity offline. So again, they're going back through this same economic cycle. And I hope they use the same technology or the philosophy that they used back in when we did this. I can tell you when you're spending out of control. I can tell you how you know you're spending out of control. You're late on orders, okay? The deliveries aren't getting to the customer on time. You start picking up customer complaints. You're not taking orders that you should be able to make, and that never shows up on the P&L, like I said before. It never shows up. Safety's going the wrong way. The Indiana plant was at 8 on a recordable rate. You're starting to get environmental non-compliances, and you have to do the consent orders. And that's a horrible thing to have to do, a consent order with EPA or some of the state agencies. You start losing your good people, and then all of a sudden the company will decide it's time to change management. There's 3 different definitions of that. I got management by last seminar attended, which is a lot of corporate people do. That's MLSA, and then management by last book read. That's another thing that corporate people do, and they try to drive that in, but all those really become programs of the day or programs of the week. And then the definition of the people on the floor. If I wait long enough, management will change, and I won't have to do this stuff. So but it's time to change management. The ultimate cost cutting of any facility is to shut the whole facility down, because you cut all the costs, but you also cut all the profit, you cut all the jobs. Is there another answer? We wanted to work both sides of the equation. We knew that we had to be better on cost, but we also want to enhance our revenue. How do you enhance revenue and reduce your cost at the same time? That's what we really wanted to look at. And this is in the Alcoa system. On enhancing revenue, you can always spend capital dollars. You can put another line in. You can make a different product. You can spend capital dollars. But what can I do with the units that I've got? What can I do with my existing hardware? How can I make more units with what I've got? What gets me both reduced cost and enhanced revenue? What helps me with lean manufacturing? Answer is pretty simple to us, because we were doing it with Alumax, and now Alcoa is doing it. I can tell you this, at 2 facilities, I think Sean Eisenhower was in here somewhere. Sean worked at a couple of facilities that gave lip service to reliability within Alcoa. Both of those plants are shut down at this point. One of them is actually being demolished and is scrapping it out. You know, reliability is something you got to do, and you got to push it really hard. We looked in the Alcoa primary metal system on the smelters, and we felt like we could save some money. And how are you going to save some money? We felt like we could cut roughly 10% of our maintenance cost. We thought that was a good starting point. That's about $50 million. We felt like we could save $1.50 for every dollar we took out of maintenance, because we're going to get better reliability and better uptime. And we felt like we could save, you know, roughly $125 million to the bottom line. That's part of that $300 million I talked about earlier. And so we started pushing this stuff. We felt like the global potential early on, within the first 2 or 3 years, would be $175 million, felt like going to $300 million over some period of time. We also looked at how we were trying to make the operations better, and I call it a drive-by shooting approach. You may have heard me use that term before. A drive-by shooting approach means that you send this expert in from corporate into the facility, and they'll spend a week there, maybe 4 or 5 days, and then they'll have a meeting with management, and they'll give you a list of things they want you to do, and then they get on a jet and they fly home. And then they'll come back 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year later, and they'll pull out that list and see what you've done, and they'll give you another list, and then they'll fly home. So that's what we were doing. And we were inconsistent from plant to plant. We had some plants that were running well and some plants that were struggling. So we were inconsistent from plant to plant. And we said, let's see if we can't move on this thing. Of course, once you tell corporate management there's a potential $300 million savings, and I think I can get 175 pretty quickly, they say, why haven't you done this before? How are you going to do this? How are you going to go about doing this? So we felt like we had to bring somebody else in to help us. And we needed professional help, because we had already cut layers of middle management out. We also realized that we needed executive participation. So even my boss, when he would go into one of the smelters, I would give him a list of questions to ask the people that are on the floor there, to make sure he reinforced exactly what we were trying to do. What's your OEE? How's this process running? You know, what's your recordable rate? Those type of things. I wanted to be sure that he was reinforcing exactly what we were trying to do, and that was very important. You know, we looked at a lot of consultants, but we wanted somebody whose mission was reliability. We wanted somebody who had proven processes in place for change management, because you've got to change how you do work. You can't add reliability and continue to do work the same way. It's frustrating to the people on the floor. You've got to change your whole culture, and that's very, very difficult, especially in an older plant. But you got to have change management, you got to have program management, and you got to have some best practice you can start utilizing, whether it's planning and scheduling, or whether it's reliability engineering, or whatever it happens to be. I want somebody that's got this in place I can look at. And I wanted somebody that was using their employees, not body shopping it, which a lot of people will do. They'll bring somebody in to work on a particular job, and then they're out and they're gone. A consultant using a consultant. And we wanted to see what they had as far as benchmarking. We wanted to see where that was going. And this is the most important thing about a consultant as you bring them in. I want somebody that can work up the organization at the top level, the plant management, but also can work with the guys on the floor, the operators, the mechanics, the electricians. I want somebody that's got credibility, that can prove to the operators and the mechanics on the floor that know what we're talking about. On the Indiana plant, the first thing I had to do was go sit down with the union and convince them that this was going to be a change, that we needed to do this. We needed to save this operation. And I had to convince them that we were going in the right direction. And to do that, first they said, it's just another program of the day. It's just another Alcoa program. We'll do this for 6 months and it'll go away and we won't be doing it anymore. And I finally convinced them they wouldn't support it, but they wouldn't fight it. They wouldn't fight it for us. And we were serious about it. And so we got them to stay neutral, and we worked with the rank and file people on the floor. And the mechanics and electricians loved it, because they don't want to be gophers. They don't want to be going for parts or tools. They want to spend their technical abilities on the floor getting work done. So again, we wanted people that could work up the organization and down the organization, that had credibility, that could walk the talk to the people that made a difference. If you want to make a change in culture, you don't do it at the top. You got to do it from the bottom up. Because if you don't do it from the bottom up, you'll never get there. You won't sustain it. You can change them on a temporary basis, but you won't sustain it. I wanted an exit strategy going into it. We don't want these people being with us forever. Train our people so that we can take over and do this. That's important. Very, very important. So we wanted an exit strategy. 3 years, we want you out of the organization. Let me bring you back to do an assessment. We want you, but again, it has to be a partnership. There has to be trust there. we started doing this in primary metals, and Alcoa started taking it globally, and all the different divisions. And I can tell you that no matter where you go, and again, you know, education and intelligence are mutually exclusive. No matter where you are in the world, you can apply this, and you can make gains with it if you'll work the organization. We felt like our operational cost would be 3 times what we could take out of maintenance. This is on our side. We didn't express that to top management, to our corporate leaders, because we're afraid they would be expecting too much. We wanted to leave a little cushion there. You do that by quality. You do that by greater process time. You do that by less scrap. You do that by greater productivity. And we used OEE as our measure. That's how. And we wanted, when we go into an operation, we want to know what OEE is, are the critical pieces of equipment in that facility. We want to get them up. We did it 3 ways, by starting with the leadership in the plant, working with interviewing the people on the floor that were doing the job, and making sure we came up with a plan that would work. And then going back, I can do check, act, cycle. So what can we do? Let's put up a plan to do it, and let's assess it, and let's go back and look at it again. And we did this from business unit to business unit. We did it from facility to facility to make sure we were getting our best practices. This was some of the initial assessments. And this is why we chose the Warwick, Indiana facility to do our first pilot operation on a plant-wide basis. It was at 444 on the assessment scale. The Mount Holly plant was already at 754. Our goal was to get it by 850. I don't have on this one, I can't remember what the initial score of the plant we had in Quebec, but it was something around 800, because we started off there as a basis of Mount Holly. But you got to have, Deming will tell you, what gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets done. You got to have an assessment. You got to have some kind of a scale. Doesn't matter what the scale is, but it's got to be measurable so that you can measure your progress in making things happen. The Indiana plant's been doing this for a little over 9 years now. Again, I was told to harvest the asset and get rid of the plant manager. The plant manager's still there, and we're still running that facility. And that's old technology. That's 1960s, late 60s, early 70s technology. That plant's running very, very well. And it's sustaining the progress. It's still working today. And basically, it became a benchmark and a model for Alcoa. Still operating at 100% today. Still protecting those jobs. What we were able to do there in 3 years, again, it was a very strong plant, very strong union plant. We were able to get the rank and file on board with us. And we were able to deliver what we needed to do, from the marginal benefits that were there, the high recordable rate, down to where we are today with a recordable rate of around 2 or less. And look at what you were able to do. We were able to increase the anode capacity in that facility by 10%. Aluminum capacity was only 4%, but that goes down to the bottom line, where we generated $18 million more per year on revenue. We were able to take $10 million out of a $35 million maintenance budget and get better uptime. So if you take the 35 and the 18, we were able to take $53 million at that one facility to the bottom line. That's why that plant's running today. That's reliability. That's the power of reliability. Again, reliability will deliver sustainable results. 9 years later, that plant is still doing what it's supposed to do. It was doing, from being a harvest asset to where we invested $400 million in that facility to upgrade the power generation system there, and to bring buy a coal mine so we could bring our own coal in. So we invested $400 million. That plant will be running 10 years from now. And it's old technology. I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership here in just a few minutes, and then I want some time for questions. But I'm going to conclude on the reliability side here. It's a cornerstone for lean manufacturing. Reliability is fact-based. It's not finger-pointing. It's not production blaming maintenance or maintenance blaming production or somebody else blaming both of them. It adds capacity. I tell people that everybody will say maintenance is an expense. I think maintenance is an investment, and it does produce a product. Maintenance produces a product. That product's called capacity. It's called capacity. So don't ever let people tell you that it doesn't produce a product. But it does add capacity. It reduces cost. It requires discipline. You can't back off on a day-to-day basis. It's got to be owned by operations, but it's got to be delivered by maintenance. It's team participation. And leadership has to make it happen. And leadership can come in forms, many different forms. And it can be some of the hourly operators on the floor all the way to the leadership in the plant. I want to talk a little bit about some of the leadership traits that we've observed and how we try to push leadership in this operation. What I've observed, there are 6 traits that I think all of you need to take into yourself and apply. The first one is embrace error. You can't have good leadership if people are afraid if they fail, you're going to jump on them, you're going to fire them. You know, you never change the status quo unless you're taking risk. If you don't take a risk, you're not going to change the status quo. If you don't change the status quo, you're not going to continually improve an operation. Anytime you change what you're doing, you have a good likelihood of failure. And if your people are afraid that if they make a mistake, that you're going to yell at them, jump on them, fire them, run them off, then they won't take a risk. They'll take what is a very conservative approach to running what they've got and maintain the status quo. Again, good leadership embraces error. You want to encourage dissent and reflective back talk. If you do something crazy, you want those people to be comfortable enough with you to tell you, that's crazy, that's not going to work, but if we do it this way, we can make it work. You don't want yes people around you. Too many times, yes people drive an organization. They're afraid to tell management that they're wrong or something. You want the guys on the floor to say, that's not going to work, but if we change it, we might be able to make it work. You want people around you that will tell you what's on their mind, not what they think you want to hear. If you got yes people around you, you got a weak organization. You want to build relationships out of trust. You want to be fair. Admit errors. Admit errors early if you make a mistake. Always take the blame. Leaders always take the blame. And they always give credit. If something works well, somebody else did it. If it didn't work well, you allowed it to happen, so it's your fault anyway when you come back to it, especially if you're in management in a facility. But when you need to correct something, you got to be constructive with people, not destructive. You never fuss at somebody in public. If you need to correct behavior, you bring them into your office, or you do it on a one-on-one basis. If you're open and honest with others, they'll be open and honest with you. If people are afraid of you, they're not going to work for you very much. Again, you can pay for the back, but you want the mind, and they've got to be willing to give you that. You got to be vulnerable. Take a stand. Take a stand. Let people know what you think. Don't look for which way the group's going and try to run and get in front of them. That's not leadership. Let people know what you believe in, what you think is right. You don't want to be a yes person either. They'll see that too. They'll read that pretty quickly. You got to truly show you care. And it's okay to be wrong. A good hitter in professional baseball makes 7 errors out of every 10 times is at bat. So he's got 7 problems, but batting 300 will make you a lot of money in baseball. And have a bias for action. Don't stand in the middle of the road. Do something. Don't be neutral. Remember the Noah principle. There are no prizes for building arcs. No prizes for predicting rain, only for building arcs. Don't criticize somebody unless you know a better way to do it. That's what I'm trying to say there. Don't criticize somebody unless you know a better way to do it. Again, there are no prizes for predicting rain, only for building arcs. And the last of the 6 is have a positive self-image about yourself. Only 20% of what you communicate is spoken language, only 20%. 80% comes from intent and body language. If I tell you you shouldn't do that, then my body language is telling me right quick that I'm wrong. I mean, basically, people read body language. That's why it's so hard to fool people. You can fool people for a short period of time, but you can't fool people for very long because your intent and your body language will rat you out. I will tell you this. Leadership is a funny thing. And what's said about other leaders will be said about you. And I'm sure it already has been said about most of you. And that's that half the people think they can do what you do better. Half the people think they can do what you do better. That's not the half you need to worry about. It's the other half. The other half thinks anybody can do what you do better. This is you got to learn from your mistakes. My daddy taught me this one. He says you got to learn from mistakes, boy, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing what you need to do. Again, a mistake is our tuition there's one thing worse than learning from your mistakes, and that's not learning from your mistakes. That'll get you in trouble, maybe get you fired. You got to learn from your mistakes. That's your tuition you're paying, or somebody's paying. Learn from your mistakes. This one's a little bit faint, but it's even better. My daddy told me, watch others, learn from their mistakes. It's a whole lot less painful if you do it that way. I want you to remember this one too. Failure is an event. It's not a person. Don't personalize failure. Don't personalize failure in what you're doing. I got two last thoughts, and I'll be glad to sit down and answer some questions with you, but everybody's good for something. You can always be used as a bad example. And again, this is too many times corporate does this one. It's not whether you win or lose, but it's how you place the blame. Don't do that either. You know, again, what my daddy told me a long time ago was, he said, happiness is between your running lights. He's talking about right here. You can choose to have an attitude, or you can choose to be happy. Don't let somebody else ruin your day. Don't let somebody else ruin your day. It's all in your head. You control that. You control that. Thank you.